Imagine waking up tomorrow to news that 2% of everyone you know, neighbors, cousins, co-workers, had died in a single conflict. Now, picture your hometown looking like a hurricane had parked over it for 4 straight years, leaving nothing but ruin. That's not some dystopian movie plot. That nightmare actually happened here, on American soil. Only the calendar read 1861 to 1865. 620,000 soldiers, fathers, and sons never came home. To put that in perspective, if a similar percentage of Americans died today, we'd be talking about over 6.5 million lives lost. Railroads melted into twisted wreckage, entire cities starved, and the very map we recognize today almost split right down the middle, perhaps never to be reunited. This isn't just a history lesson. This is the visceral, heart-wrenching story of how America almost tore itself apart, how it plunged into a darkness that seemed impossible to escape, and yet, somehow, stitched itself back together, forever changed. The spark that ignited this inferno lit well before the first cannon boomed at Fort Sumter. For decades, the North and South shared a flag, but lived in 2 fundamentally different worlds, creating a chasm that grew wider with every passing year. Think of it as 2 distinct nations trying to share one house, one rapidly industrializing, building factories, canals, and railroads with paid labor, often immigrants seeking a new life. The other remained largely agrarian, its vast wealth and way of life inextricably tied to the brutal institution of enslaved labor. It wasn't just an economic difference, it was a moral one. A clash of ideals that festered beneath the surface of polite political discourse. Every new state applying for statehood wasn't just a dot on a map. It was a battleground for future power in Washington, a referee deciding which side got championship points in Congress. Tempers flared in places most folks never think about: Kansas polling stations, where pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers literally shot it out on Senate floor desks, where congressmen brawled. And even in church pews, as denominations split over the morality of human bondage. By 1860, 11 Southern states decided they'd rather file for political divorce than keep arguing inside the Union. Secession looked bold on paper, perhaps even a noble stand for states' rights. In reality, it yanked the safety net out from under everyday life for millions. Overnight, mailboxes held 2 kinds of letters, one begging relatives to stay loyal to Washington. The other waving goodbye because Virginia is my country now. Families who had carved Thanksgiving turkeys together for generations prepared to carve each other up on battlefields nobody had bothered to name yet. Let's try to shrink 620,000 deaths down to something our heads can hold, something that truly hits home. Picture the entire city of Baltimore, every single man, woman, and child wiped clean off the census. Or, imagine every seat in Michigan Stadium, the biggest in the country, filled twice over, then silenced forever. Those numbers look medieval, like something out of a plague-ridden Europe. But they marched through American cornfields with rifled muskets that could drop a man at 400 yards, a terrifying leap in killing power. Bullets were only part of the story. Added artillery of its own, far more deadly and indiscriminate. Dysentery, typhoid, and pneumonia killed twice as many men as bullets did, often slowly and agonizingly. Field hospitals were less places of healing and more horrific processing centers. Surgeons, often lacking basic antiseptic knowledge, used the same saw for 10 amputations before lunch, simply wiping it on their bloody aprons. Chloroform and ether ran out so often that whiskey doubled as painkiller and a crude disinfectant. If you were 20 years old in 1861 and joined up, odds heavily favored you dying before you hit 25. That's not just history. That's an entire generation, literally deleted from the future, leaving behind a nation profoundly scarred and forever changed by its sacrifice. We often like to picture neat battle lines, heroic charges, and strategic maneuvers, but the war bled far beyond the fields of engagement, seeping into kitchens, barns, and parlors across the nation. In the South, Union blockades turned once bustling southern ports into maritime ghost towns. A bale of cotton that once sold for 11 cents a pound might fetch 62 if you could somehow dodge patrol boats and outrun British smugglers, but most couldn't. Basic necessities vanished. Flour disappeared from shelves, replaced by desperate substitutes. Families learned to make acorn coffee and Confederate candles from beef tallow and cotton string. Enduring nights punctuated by the distant rumble of artillery flashes on the horizon. The very fabric of society began to fray as hunger became a constant companion and the fear of Union raids loomed large. Meanwhile, in the North, women stepped into arsenals, and government offices, earning wages and performing duties their mothers never imagined, fundamentally altering social roles. But they also read casualty lists that read like church directories, each name a punch to the gut. One New Hampshire town of just 1,200 residents sent 189 men south, a mere 47 mailed letters home, and only 3 came back whole. Every farm field, every village green, every city street grew a crop of anxiety as families waited, hoped, and grieved. The war wasn't just fought by soldiers. It was lived, suffered, and endured by everyone. Armies, no matter how brave or well led, need 3 things to fight: food, shoes, and a way to move both. This is where the North's industrial might became an almost insurmountable advantage. The South boasted legendary generals, brilliant tacticians, and fierce fighting men, yet produced almost 0 locomotives. Northern factories, meanwhile, forged 96% of U.S. railroad iron in 1860. So, every mile Confederate troops advanced, they often shredded their own supply lines, struggling to feed and equip their forces. Meanwhile, Union engineers, with an almost endless supply of materials and labor, could throw up 25 miles of fresh track in a single day to keep siege cannons rolling toward Petersburg, or to rush reinforcements to a critical battlefield. Railroads became the war's quiet, unsung victor. Wherever steel rails stretched, victory often followed, bringing men, munitions, and provisions. By 1865, the Southern Rail Network looked less like a transportation system and more like a broken Necklace rails heated over campfires and twisted around trees by retreating Confederates so enemies couldn't reuse them. A desperate act of defiance. Rebuilding after such devastation required more than just money. It demanded a complete reimagining of how the South would even participate in a modern economy, a challenge that would take generations to overcome. Pick any three-day clash in world history, and you'll struggle to match Gettysburg's body count, a staggering 51,000 casualties. Robert E. Lee marched into Pennsylvania, confident that a major Northern victory would force peace talks and perhaps even secure European recognition for the Confederacy. Instead, he met a shoe factory town with a college, a cemetery, and a stubborn Union general. George Meade, who used the high ground like a chess grandmaster. For 3 brutal days in July 1863, the fields and hills around Gettysburg became a charnel house. The climax, Pickett's charge, saw thousands of Confederate soldiers march bravely across open fields, under a hail of Union artillery and rifle fire, in a desperate, futile attempt to break the Union center. When those shattered ranks stumbled back across the fields, the Confederacy lost more than men. It lost momentum, a psychological blow from which it would never truly recover. From July 4, 1863, onward, the South fought a slow, agonizing retreat measured in burned rail depots, empty stomachs, and dwindling hope. Yet, this horrific battle also forged the America we know, a single nation, indivisible, not a loose pact of regional cousins. It was here, in the blood-soaked soil of Pennsylvania, that the idea of a truly united United States began to solidify. Appomattox didn't end the bitterness, it just moved it into courtrooms and polling places, transforming a hot war into a cold one. 4 million newly freed citizens, once enslaved, stepped onto society's dance floor, only to find the exits bolted. Their hopes for land, education, and true equality were systematically undermined. Black codes, designed to keep former slaves in a state of near slavery, cropped up across the South, followed by insidious sharecropping contracts that bound families to the land through perpetual debt. And then there were the night-riding terrorists, the Ku Klux Klan, and other white supremacists. Groups who replaced plantation whips with legal and psychological chains, using violence and intimidation to suppress black voting rights and economic advancement. Congress, horrified by the resurgence of Confederate power and the plight of freedmen, impeached President Andrew Johnson for going soft on Confederate leaders. Meanwhile, opportunists, derisively called carpetbaggers and scalawags, descended upon a ruined South, some genuinely trying to rebuild, others exploiting the chaos for personal gain. Up north, veterans formed powerful fraternal organizations that lobbied for pensions bigger than the entire federal budget pre-war, a constant reminder of the war's cost. Sectional hatred didn't disappear. It cooled into an icy standoff, a simmering resentment that lasted almost a century, shaping politics, culture, and society. Healing required more than bandages. It required rewriting the Constitution 3 amendments in 5 years, something that had never happened before and hasn't happened since. A testament to the profound, unfinished business of the war. So why didn't the country fracture like a dropped dinner plate, shattering into irreparable pieces? 3 critical reasons, often overlooked, saved the day. First, industrial capacity. The North could replace a broken musket, a lost cannon, or a worn-out uniform almost overnight, churning out war materials on an unimaginable scale. The South, largely agrarian, watched each loss become permanent, each broken piece of equipment an irreplaceable deficit. This industrial might was the grinding engine of Union victory. Second, diplomacy. Abraham Lincoln's brilliant team, led by Secretary of State William Seward, kept Europe on the sidelines. By framing the war increasingly as a moral crusade against slavery, they starved the Confederacy of the foreign recognition and aid that had bolstered earlier American revolts. Imagine if Britain or France had intervened. The outcome could have been drastically different. Third, and perhaps most profoundly, sheer willpower, common soldiers, from farmers to factory workers, truly believed the phrase United States was singular, not plural. They carried that grammatical detail, that profound conviction of national unity, across blood-soaked fields, through countless battles, until that belief hardened into undeniable fact. When Grant met Lee under an apple tree at Appomattox, the surrender terms were remarkably generous, allowing Confederate officers to keep their sidearms and soldiers to take their horses home for spring plowing. Lincoln wanted reconciliation, not humiliation, understanding that a punitive peace would only sow the seeds of future conflict. That moment of mercy prevented a prolonged guerrilla warfare that could have flared for decades, truly bringing the nation to its knees. It was a testament to Lincoln's vision for a reunited America. If this story hit you harder than your high school textbook ever managed, if it made you feel the weight of those 4 years, then please tap that like button and subscribe for more history that feels alive, history that breathes. Drop a comment telling me which Civil War site you'd visit first or already did, and why it mattered to you. Your stories, your engagement, they keep this channel rolling like iron wheels on railroad steel. The Civil War didn't just nudge American history. It bulldozed it, leveled the old landscape, and then painstakingly rebuilt something new, something stronger, something profoundly different. Every national cemetery, every rail line west of the Mississippi, every ballot cast by a formerly enslaved citizen, every struggle for civil rights, all of it traces back to those for fiery, transformative years. The war that almost destroyed America became, paradoxically, the forge that redefined what America even meant. Not just a collection of competing states, but a single, indivisible nation willing to pay the steepest, most agonizing price to stay intact. Next time you fold a $5 bill, look at Lincoln's gaunt, weary face. Remember that he once held a country together with little more than iron will and an unshakable belief that democracy, for all its bruises and flaws, deserved one more shot at life. Let's make sure that price paid in full by a lost generation, by shattered families, and by a nation remade in blood never, ever gets forgotten.